I hear you. I hear you.
Now we're on.
Oh, good. I just heard Catherine.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Red is on.
Green is on for those. Red is on for these.
So red's off for you.
Yeah.
Just keeping us on our toes. Making sure we're paying attention.
You're red, Andrew.
And we do expect
Oh,
Greg, but traffic in Corvallis was legendary this evening, so we may be a few minutes late. We are at our appointed time. I don't know, it says what, 6?
We are 6:02.
6:02, so we are at our time, so we'll call this work session to order. And if we could go around with introductions, that would be helpful. And Rick, would you begin, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Rager, Assistant County Administrator for Benton County.
Petra Sheets, Planning Director. Liz Irish, Planning Commissioner.
Ed Fulford, Planning Commissioner representing Corvallis.
Evelyn Lee, Planning Commissioner.
John Wilson, Planning Commissioner.
Andrew Struthers, Planning Commissioner.
Sarah Cash, Planning Commissioner.
And Nick Fowler on the Planning Commission. Thank you all for, and Catherine, could you please announce your presence?
Sure can. Catherine Visco, Planning Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. We hear you from way off on the left-hand side, so it's disconcerting. It sounds like you're coming in the door. But thank you all for taking time to come this evening. It's one of the rare opportunities where we don't have any sort of quasi-judicial proceeding. This is a work session opportunity to discuss a little more informally on several of the topics of interest that we've identified previously. But we'll begin with approval of the minutes that Ms. Ray, and I'm sorry, we didn't introduce. Linda's gone, but please repeat.
Alyssa Thompson.
Thank you. And Ms. Ray is here, but temporarily occupied. But Ms. Ray has distributed the minutes, and hopefully everyone had an opportunity to look at them. They were of our training session back in March. Entertain a motion to approve. Andrew.
I will move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a duly made and seconded motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion in terms of amendments or edits to those minutes? Hearing none, call for the vote. All please signify your approval by aye or some similar designation.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. And the minutes provide a kind of a nice segue into our first discussion topic, which is we had identified training as one of those areas that we would like to invest in as a group. And thanks to Petra for introducing us to Ross Williamson, who I thought did an excellent job of the training, which focused on kind of the legal bent to what we do in the Planning Commission. But I wanted to have a brief discussion about, are there other training domains or topics that might be of interest to the commissioners that we might be able to arrange and schedule? And Commissioner Struthers, I know that you've got an idea already.
Yeah, so I was talking with Chair Fowler before the meeting and coming with my experience from the city of Corvallis and being on their city council and dealing with land use from a city perspective. And when I saw this topic, like, what do I need from a county perspective, more and specifically Benton County, and where am I lacking in that was farm use land laws and related to land use. I hear things, I read things. I'm like, I know nothing about farm use and farm laws when it comes to land use. So that to me would be a big area because I know there are things coming down the pipeline, either from the state level and potentially in the county level, just understanding what that is. And then we were talking about some more around resource zones and what are the restrictions and land use laws around resource zones.
I'm wondering if we might be as broad as possible and would this meet your spirit anyway, is just kind of do a compare and contrast of resource zone versus residential zone type of land use implications?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts on that topic or
I think it's great.
other topics?
No, I think it's great.
I think it's great too. And although there is rural residential that can overlap with resource land. Some rural residential is 20 acres and has farms and some not, but rural residential might be interesting to include in that.
Looks like you're ready, Commissioner Irish, to jump in here.
No, I'm fine. I just think that's a great idea. I think that we could all dive in a little deeper into that one. It's a common topic, so.
It makes me wonder, and I'm speaking from a fairly uninformed perspective as to what you all are already knowledgeable about, but I wonder if it's just that we look at things, the parts of the county that aren't Corvallis.
So,
That's what I was.
yeah.
You're trying to
Yeah.
accomplish with your proposal.
Right.
And this brings up a thought specifically about the LC. It's my understanding that unincorporated areas have different rules than incorporated areas, and we might want to cover that. Because I know LC is becoming very active. We would want to be sensitive to those differences, which appear to be great.
Yes.
I was just going to chime in. I know we're going to talk about and debrief on our activities from last week, but the one thing that this brings to mind is that there's a great deal of jargon in land use planning and land use descriptions and everything. And in line with this type of broadened view of an overall, I know some of it was covered when, and it is to some degree spoken to in some of the materials that I was directed to when I was brought on. But it would be nice, maybe even as a refresher, to kind of go through that, because the jargon can, we can get lost in the jargon, so to speak.
I guess I do have things to say. Also, the state 1537 and the housing bill and the UGB expansion allowances. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the process of UGB expansion, because that question's probably going to come up for some of the areas. I know some of us just went through a formal usual process with Adair Village, but it might be good to see if there's a difference between the usual and then this process that they're talking about as well. I think that would be super good.
And what are the potential paths to increased housing in our various zones?
I'm curious, Ms. Schutz, do you have comments on any of these, or these topics that the professional staff would be able to give us a primer and kind of lead the discussion?
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
Are any of these outside of the domain that you or your staff would feel comfortable?
No, not at all. In fact, the non-urban theme, I think we could cover a lot of ground with that. So farm, forest, resource land, and then probably add forest to that as well.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then the second was about urbanization, issues, urban growth boundary expansion. I know Monroe's interested in a land swap opportunity, so we could talk about the logistics of that and urban fringe policy that Benton County is responsible for.
Has the DLCD come out with all this final stuff with 1537? Are they ready to start, like, saying these are the processes and this is what we're doing it?
So yeah, the statutes come out first, right? And then they
Right.
work forever on the administrative rules. The administrative rules are not completed.
Okay, gotcha. So probably can't do the 1537s
I
yet.
would probably start with the first, and then by the
Yep.
time we get to
Maybe we'll be
housing.
there.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And Commissioner Disco, wanted to check in with you first. Can you hear the conversation? And
I can.
second, do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I can. Thank you. How would you prefer me to get your attention? Raise hand or just try to find a time to speak out loud?
Raising your hand or making a funny face will probably recognize you are on our screen now, so we can see you.
Okay, super. I do have a couple of comments. So first of all, I'm just wondering, with changes that are occurring and how the county is likely to become more involved with land use expansion, housing in particular from state. And is that echoing badly on your side? It sounds like it is on my side.
We are not getting an echo here.
Okay, then I'll just ignore the echo. I'm wondering if a couple things. I would like to see maybe just an overview, a brush up, if you will, of our statewide land use goals and the ones that apply to Benton County. I know that they don't all, but it's easy to make assumptions that we're all on the same page. So getting into some kind of common understanding or foundational space might be helpful just as an introduction. And then the differences between Benton County, and we're talking about, but I'm just kind of wrapping a bow on all of it. The difference between county land use and what's happening in our cities. I look at, and again, this comes to the point of what's the state going to ask of the counties as it relates to housing, urban growth expansions, potential decision making in that space that's been different from the home rule space of our municipalities in the county. And then also, how do we look at housing needs analysis? So the state's doing, or either finished or in the process of that. I know they were working on that about a year ago. I'm not sure where that is presently. What does that look like for our cities? What does our city buildable land inventories look like? So kind of bringing all the pieces together so that we can comprehensively understand our incorporated cities, our areas like LC, for example, in some of our rural areas, where our responsibilities are currently, where they are anticipated to be changing in the next couple of years. We also have the factor of the climate-friendly and equitable communities space, and that impacts, of course, Corvallis, Philomath. If that extends to Adair as well, it might, but it doesn't impact our rural areas or Monroe, for example. So how is that changing? Because it certainly is changing our land use rules as well. Overall, I'll just say that I'm supportive of all topics. I think that any refreshers and making sure we're all on the same page is going to be beneficial. Everything that everyone said, I agree is going to bring value to this group as we move forward.
Any other comments or topics or comments on these topics? And checking back the new ones added, no worries to.
Not at all.
Good.
No.
And perhaps you could give us a sense as to how many training sessions this is. Is this one work session or are we talking about four?
I've kind of heard 4.
Okay.
So like the rural, and then the urbanization piece, the housing piece, and then this last idea about the coordination efforts. So yeah, and it depends on how much. I mean, you can even cut that down into subsections as well if we wanted to, go a half hour, 45 minutes at each subsequent meeting, something like that, or do an entire work session on one topic. Either way would work just fine.
And how much staff time would be required to prepare for these 4 short sessions? Is that within the priority set, or is this something that you can do off the cuff, or?
Probably not off the cuff. But no, I mean, there's plenty of literature. There's a lot of external free training on each of these topics too, if that would be your preference. We could do it internally. So, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. Probably just want to speak with you a little bit further about what your expectations are.
I think we're kind of looking to be led, because
Okay.
we know what we don't know,
Okay.
but we don't know how to learn it.
Okay. Yeah, good. If I could put a little time into that and maybe pitch a schedule and subtopics, and give a little bit more thought to how much time it would take to get through the material.
I would appreciate some links for some external free classes as well, or presentations. That would always be helpful. We could pop into those and pick up a few things when we can. I think that would be awesome.
That just led me to realize that there's a lot of material at the APA website, both on the Oregon chapter and on the national. But what I've discovered is that I can get lost in the thicket of like so much information. And maybe if you have, or if you're able to sort of target some pieces in there that you can identify that would help us use that external information, that might be helpful as well.
Sure.
This does tend to be a pretty interactive group, and so maybe that is pre-work, and then some sort of a hosted session that we can do Q&A and discussion. others.
And then my only two quick thoughts is with these trainings, tailoring them to specific more a little bit towards Benton County versus sort of the statewide focus of what, what the rural resources and zones, but sort of focusing around what Benton County is. And then two, I know we have Zoom, which is great for recording our meetings. So if there's a way to make sure we get a clean recording so that maybe we can save these for future planning commissioners as people transition off and on. So that way we can point back to these videos, say, hey, we had a great session on this particular topic. This might be a good video to go back and watch.
That is a great idea. In fact, for the planning commission training, when there's time, we're going to try to edit that so that it's a little bit more consumable. But I love that idea. That's a really inexpensive way of capturing that for perpetuity and future commissioners. So yeah, great idea.
Other thoughts to wrap this topic up?
Just a resource bank,
Mm-hmm.
just organizing all of that into a resource bank would be marvelous in your free time.
In some other jurisdictions, it's a great idea. Some well, do make YouTube videos and they post that on their planning pages. So the general public can have both an not an interface, but an exposure to the planning commission and the issues that they're working on or need to deal with. So it's a great learning tool across the board. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we don't have an identified budget to go through that process at this point, but I think that's a fantastic goal.
I have a request. Can we post our planning commission meetings on our YouTube page for the county? Because none of them are listed there. We can't go back and watch the planning commission meetings.
Updated the website to have past everything that was on the old website is now on the new, but it was done today.
Okay, cool. So it's on the website, but not on our YouTube page.
Correct.
Okay. It might be easier for the public to access on the YouTube page as well. I mean, I don't mean to be a bother, but all of the ways we can communicate, the better. So I think having our meetings on YouTube so people can see them would be great.
We can check into word staff idea in terms of what we can and can't do.
Sounds good.
So are we ready to move on to the next topic or any other comments on training requests? Our next topic is I wanted to have this meeting in very close proximity to the April 30th meeting we had down in Monroe so that it is fresh in our minds and that we can use the term launch and learn. We launched last week and fortunately we didn't have to abort, and I think it was generally a success despite or notwithstanding the degree of choreography wasn't up to the level we would all like and so forth, but it met at least the minimum requirements for some outreach. And so I wanted to talk about last meeting, what went well, what could go better in the next time, and then perhaps brainstorm what is the next time and what is the kind of the core of the content that we would use to host the next meeting. We always want to bring something with us, even though it is predominantly a listening session. We can bring something with us to get the ball rolling and then use our 2 years to spend most of the time listening. So thoughts on how last week went, what could be done better, and fortunately, perhaps I could impose upon you, Commissioner Lee, being somewhat local to Monroe and having many contacts in the Monroe area and having gotten some feedback, perhaps we could start with what you've gleaned.
Yes, I do have comments about the process. Excuse me. One of them, do you mind if I just read them or sort of paraphrase them? I'll try to be quick. I would like to suggest that in the future meetings, the physical format is having people at the front, presenters, sit so the audience can see and hear them. The chairman was good. He went to the front and talked so people could hear and see. It was extremely hard to hear what others were saying. when the public speaks at county commissioner meetings, they go to the front where there is a mic so everyone can hear. So, I was in another meeting recently where it was about wildfire, and suddenly there was a chat saying 80% of adults over 55 can't hear very well, so please keep that in mind.
Yeah,
So
so true.
another comment about process, I think, was here. One comment was, this meeting was all about Monroe and housing. I thought we would be able to talk about other things. I hope they come back and we can talk about other things. The remaining comments are about the substance of that meeting. I don't know if you want me to read those now or just wait until we talk about
Any
substance.
and all is fair game, so why don't we go ahead with that?
Okay. Okay, this person says, learning about the conditions of the city's soil, which apparently is well known to everyone who lives there, but wasn't known to the people who bought Red Hills subdivision, colon. I think that the goal of having additional housing in Monroe that will cover more land that is currently empty is the wrong goal. It seems as building a subdivision on sand, the underlying conditions make it doomed. Why is more single-family housing on that scale a goal? Yes, it gives Monroe more SEC revenue, more property taxes, but it also requires more expensive, a bigger water plant, in addition to the one that is being corrected now, additional stress on schools, roads, etc. Another comment, yes, Monroe wants to be more attractive, but it's not Monroe's job to provide housing for people who can't afford to live in Corvallis, where they work or go to school. Maybe it needs to be recognized that Monroe's land just doesn't support more housing at that scale, even though people think it would give Monroe a windfall in SDCs. Another comment. Why doesn't Monroe roll out the welcome mat to people from the area who would be interested in being a part of the business district in Monroe? The riverfront plan does not require outside entrepreneurs. Several local entrepreneurs have been trying to invest in Monroe. Why are they ignored or not given help by the city or the county if they really want to help Monroe as opposed to getting more housing for Corvallis? Those are the comments that I received. I have my own comments. Shall I go ahead?
Please, you're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. All right, thank you. So the Planning Commission heard a lot about the various deficiencies in infrastructure in Monroe, and it really only heard about a tithe of them. There's a lot of underground infrastructure, sewer lines and water lines that are collapsing. And so Monroe is generations, at least one, probably 1.5 or 2 generations behind on infrastructure maintenance. And it seems to me like it's a mistake for the county to support Monroe population growth until it gets its infrastructure issues in line. So I guess I'll read what I have here because I'm not thinking that clearly. So so the other issue is that they have very limited staff time. And so in order to add an extracurricular activity, which I classify like UGB trades or UGB expansion or anything that isn't just normal operating business in Monroe, it's a challenge for them to do all that. Presently, they have the infrastructure needs that need to be addressed, and they have the Riverside District Plan that they need to implement. And so it's a challenge to them to do everything. And it seems to me like from the 30,000 foot level, which I think, we all try to achieve, Monroe needs to make a choice between whether it's going to spend its extracurricular staff time on growth of housing development or it, but, you know, get its house in order and deal with its infrastructure issues and its Riverside District Plan, which has already been through all the outreach. It has a lot of support. It is just waiting to be implemented. So let's see, I had another thought. I thought it was interesting to note that there has been an engineering study completed that details the infrastructure needs in Monroe, and that sets them up to be ready to write grants to get more money for infrastructure. And, you know, that was done by Rick Hohenbaum, who was city manager before Steve. So also regarding the Red Hills subdivision, I can remember I was attending Monroe City Council meetings at the time when conditions of approval for the applicant were developed and approved, and the soil drainage conditions that the people talked about at Red Hills were well known at that time. They were in the conditions of approval that they needed to be mitigated. The developer signed that. The county offered assistance of its hydrogeologist to make sure that those soil conditions were mitigated properly, but they were not mitigated properly. And so I think, for one thing, the fact that that developer is now once again being considered as a partner in the development, further development in Monroe is, I just think that's just outrageous. There should have been some negative consequences for that behavior, that lack of following up on conditions of approval. The consequences for that community can be very dire, I think. And that situation with that developer and the conditions of approval and the resulting conditions that are at Red Hills now leads me to return to a question that I addressed to this group several months ago, which was, I have to read it because it's complicated here. If a land use action or application involves potential negative consequences, and the only thing that makes the action or application acceptable are conditions of approval, but conditions of approval are not monitored or enforced, how can a planning commissioner in good faith approve an application like that? So that's kind of an existential question. If conditions of approval are not met and they result in badness for a community, and we know that that's happened, i.e. Red Hills, it's hard to vote for a questionable application or action when the only thing that makes it acceptable are the conditions of approval. So that's just a point I think we should continue to discuss. So my final question is about that developer. I knew he cut a lot of, the Red Hills developer cut a lot of corners, not just the soil conditions. And to think that why anybody in a position of responsibility is even considering a repeat of that situation is just beyond me. So those are my comments.
Well, thank you for reaching out to some of the community there and summarizing that. It's always good to hear that from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yes.
The true situation. So, Commissioner Wilson, it sounds like you got something.
Well, no, the one thing that I took away from the meeting was that one of the things that felt, I think, overwhelming, especially for the public, and it comes through in a lot of the comments that you collected, is that again, I come back to the jargon, which was what I brought up during the training session stuff, is there was a lot of jargon that was thrown out during that meeting. And I think that it wasn't so much a confusion on my part, and I don't know that it was necessarily for most of the community members, but when they were talking about the land swap, I could sense that there was confusion about, does that mean that the landowner that's being swapped out has to sell and the landowner being swapped in has to buy? I mean, it was just, there was a lot of confusion. And I thought that if things, not necessarily that if things were better explained, that there would be a better outcome, just that there'd be a better understanding of what was being discussed. And I think that I sensed from the comments, the woman that you spoke to after the meeting, she was right behind us. And I just remember that I think a lot of that frustration was that the city, Monroe is, throwing out all this stuff. They're talking about infrastructure, which you so aptly discussed. And then an eagerness to, on Monroe's part, to sort of push forward a lot, on a lot of these things. And as you said, a lot of it is extracurricular for them, and whether they have the resources to do that. So I think that in hindsight, not that we're necessarily saying that there would be a better outcome, but a better understanding would allow not only the commissioners and the city council and their commissioners, and then the public at large, or the community of Monroe, to better understand where are we going. Because the one thing that really concerned me, as you pointed out, Evelyn, is that when I started listening about the Red Hills, I was like, oh, those poor people, in the houses there. And I don't know. I can only assume that there were land use conditions that were imposed on the developer, but we don't know to what extent.
Oh, yeah, it was.
And so anyway, but, and so I think that it's not, I hate to use the term, put the brakes on a little bit, but really have them, in conversation to talk about, as you said, Evelyn, to what can we afford to do right now versus, and what do we have the resources to do right now versus what our blue sky idea is of how Monroe expands or grows and all of those things. And they seem to have a lot of things on the table. The riverfront,
Riverside District.
The Riverside District Plan. And to me, my impression was that that's a plan that's been out there that just hasn't been really acted on. So anyway, I don't want to go on too long, but I just wanted to share that I thought that it was jargon. I think that helping the community understand where the city and the planners and everybody, that everybody understands what's going on, because that poor woman behind me, I was like, I think that if not that things, if they were better explained, but at least if there was more understanding about what's the direction we're going, that she might be less frustrated about the way it was being presented. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Fulford.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few things. I like what Evelyn and John were adding. A couple things from my side. I thought the food was great. Right off the bat, got me set up nicely, so it was good. We had 50 plus people there.
It was.
And we had a horseshoe for the guys who all didn't attend, and there was a sort of a group behind us. So that idea of standing up in front, having slides, I think was something we missed, but we launched and learned. And so I think we're adjusting a little bit on that front. But personally, standing up, I think, engages at least me with the audience better. And having to sit there knowing people were behind me and trying to project. And then, of course, sort of adjust my thoughts on the topic at hand without the slides was a little tricky, but I think we got it to it. Housing was important, but I think, we spent so much time on Monroe's infrastructure, tax base. How do you fund these well-needed projects? We ended up going down that road quite a bit. I do want to say the side conversations with the folks afterwards, lovely. Every single one of them was, and the board or the commissioners were saying, this is the most people they've seen in a long time. Normally it's 5 to 6 people, and half of them are the commissioners, right? And so, but I would like to say we need to have follow-up visits. That first visit's always it's the honeymoon visit and everybody's on their best behavior, and a couple additional ones, maybe we'll get down a little lower into some of the stuff that really might matter to them. I would recommend, Liz and I actually went to the pit and went up to the Red Hills and kind of drove around that area a little bit. So when they were talking about some of these things, I was like, oh, I've seen that 20-acre pit on the north side of town. And it was It was,
Mhm.
Yes.
yeah, the brick and tile, yes, that place. But yeah, super welcoming. I enjoyed it. I think we should do more of these and, yeah, lovely place for sure. But I can see their challenges, right? They got to get more money, but they don't want to develop. And they've got this leaking spring thing from the one side of town. So anyway, I enjoyed it.
So unfortunately, I wasn't there in person to engage with everyone. And so my comments are just what I was able to witness from being there virtually. And I want to echo what Ed and Evelyn said about from being virtually, the audio is actually a little hard at times to hear. And I think you all were using the owl. And in fact, the owl itself the camera wasn't actually picking up who was speaking most of the time. So even the owl was having problems hearing folks. And so I think this, if knowing the space is maybe, I don't know if the county has more than one owl, like where you can daisy chain the owls together, like just knowing the space, how big it is and whether or not we need to have, the audio. I didn't see anyone comment about the audio, but I could tell from me, like I actually had my audio turned all the way up for a Zoom meeting, which is uncommon. And so it was just like, it's just one of those things that even if you have a lot of people in person, there were still 7 or 8 of us that were online. So there's still that aspect of folks that you're trying to engage that are online. So that's really the only feedback I have, just knowing how big the space is and how many speakers there are going to be. And that may have helped with people if they were sitting or standing, just knowing the space and how the audio works.
The room was not acoustically kind.
And that very well could be what the problem was.
Yeah, that's really way too big of a spread out for the owls to work effectively.
That's your hand. Did you have additional comments? Looked like you wanted to chime in.
A variety of them. First of all, I apologize for being late. I just want to let you know that your extremely effective security system left me at the front door for 15 minutes. I was here, I just couldn't get in.
Oh, yeah.
So, we need to have a security here someday. Anyway, I appreciate your comments about choreography. I think a variety of things. I think I did not fully appreciate or didn't understand the purpose of the meeting. And partly that is related to my understanding of the role of the subcommittee that I'm supposed to be leading. I'm looking to community meetings to help glean understandings of where they feel that county level code is insufficient to address their interests and needs as a community. And we were not able to have that conversation. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be there, but at some point, the role of this subcommittee is to collect that information. So we have to figure out a way of doing that. And so I thought we were going to do that. Naive me, but I think it was a really productive meeting. I appreciate it. I think I learned a lot. I like to just watch. I was intrigued by the extent to which the meeting was really between the leadership of the community and the residents of the community, and the extent to which they didn't understand each other. And I thought that was telling. Well, that's really interesting. I'm not sure what the county's role is now. We may have ideas about what they should be doing, but I'm not sure. I think the county's role is to tell them what to do with their community. So I want to be careful, but I certainly found, sometimes I felt like you were facilitating a meeting between leadership and the town.
Yeah, it did feel like that.
Didn't that feel like that?
Yeah.
I went, great, that's a role. I'm not sure that's the one I anticipated. But clearly, if they're going to move forward, they're going to need to figure out a way of communicating internally within their community better. I don't know if you told them that or help them with that. That's, they have interesting ideas. They got to pick one, I don't know what they're going to do. So, but I'm still interested in how do I figure out what's our role in that, and how do we find a way of cleaning where they would say, we would like to do that, but we feel like the county's role, or code in this case, is insufficient for addressing the kinds of needs that we feel we have as a community. And I need to find, and I don't know how to do that yet. I need to talk with staff a lot to find out how do we get that information from this community and all the other communities that are part of that Commissioner Struthers has agreed to help me with this, and I'm very appreciative of the law. But I think that's what we're trying to, there's a variety of ways and places where we have to glean that kind of input. But certainly, getting out into communities and having that kind of conversation with them is critically important to the success of this subcommittee, and I think all of us. So I just got to figure out when does that happen and how do we build that into it. Maybe it's the next set of meetings or something like that, but try to build that in. I learned a lot about Monroe.
Well, and if I can add a little bit to what Greg was saying, it was interesting. We're the county coming in, and we basically initiated a citywide discussion, which if that's the one thing we added to that community, so be it. And maybe we'll have similar, the county's coming in and everybody in town shows up, or at least a good participation level. So I thought it was good, but you're right. Had one guy talking, how to raise money and his chemical mix of the water treatment and all that, and the city going, what? Or yeah.
And that's with Commissioner Wilson's comment, the leadership had a tendency to use jargon to try to sort of like essentially say, you don't understand. It's really complicated.
Disarm them. Yeah.
And that's not an effective way of
it kind of annoys them.
Can't margin, but if there's an opportunity for us to help with that. Is that Commissioner Lee?
So this brings up a question that I continue to have and forget to ask. There is a Benton County planning staff member named Patrick Deepa, and he comes to Monroe to help. And I don't know what his role really is. Generally speaking, I hear he helps the developer. So that's a question.
Would you like to address that?
Yeah, sure. A couple things. Pat no longer works for the county, and we no longer have a contract with Monroe. So Monroe, the difference between and the rest of the incorporated small cities do not have a contract with the county anymore as well. So one of the differences with the outreach is going to be between the incorporated and the unincorporated communities, right? Because the incorporated communities, they are under their own city home rule. So the county has no influence on their code, and they have no influence on our code. So the fact that they have issues with that, the conduit to making improvements for the community, if they were to want to contract with the county, that could be a potential outcome, to have an experienced land use planner utilize their code or help them to improve their development code, so that they can help themselves. That's probably the most appropriate role for the county staff to have with the incorporated. The unincorporated, it's different because the unincorporated communities are obligated to utilize the county code. So.
And this strikes me as something that we could do better next time, is just explain to all of us before we drop in what the jurisdictional boundaries are. And so we get an understanding of it. And what I was expecting we got, which was the context of this portion of the county. And we actually have had a land use application within the last 2 years on Coon Road, which is immediately adjacent to that Red Hills area. And so it's important that we understand that context when we're looking at potentially land use applications immediately adjacent, whether it's formal fringe or informal fringe. It's a context that we need to be aware of. And I want to be very, very cognizant and sensitive. Well, Ed will know this from HP. We used to call them seagulls. The corporate seagulls would come in. They fly in, eat all your food, poop all over the place, and leave. I want to be sure that we don't, as a county, get labeled seagulls. And so not only do we need to understand the jurisdictions.
Hey, we brought the pizza.
That's right.
That's fair. That's fair.
But if we understand the jurisdictional boundaries, we can set that expectation with them as well. We're not here to solve their problems, and if they're incorporated, we want to recognize the arm's length relationship. But we also want to recognize that we need to understand this context of the citizenry.
Yeah.
I want to mention, I think our president's actually complicated this situation a little bit. based on the comments that you had, which is we don't need more housing for Corvallis. That's not why we were there. And the housing request didn't come from us. It came from Monroe.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's an interesting dynamic that our presence brought to that whole conversation now. Now it's us that's asking for the housing, but that wasn't the case. We were there to hear what they needed, right? And how do we say that? How do we gently nudge future conversations to say, we're not here to give housing for anybody. We're here to do what you guys want us to do. And so probably we should emphasize that when we go in.
Sure.
And that speaks also to delineating the subcommittee's role in outreach and the broader, we have several outreach initiatives. We've got one around the periodic review. We've got one around trying to understand whether the code is meeting the needs. We've got another one around housing. So we have at least 3 different kind of outreach programs. And so I think we do need to be a better job of being crystal clear as to what this meeting with a local entity or a local group is intended to accomplish.
I was just going to add to the discussion about the planners, because Evelyn had brought up, Commissioner had brought up the question about that particular planner that doesn't, I don't know that that particular planner works for any incorporated or
Not in Benton
community.
County.
Yeah, not in Benton County, but each of those incorporated communities do have a planner that they hire independently. I know that we have one in Adair, and a small planning commission of commissioners that review the limited number of petitions that go into them. But so they have a planner. I assume Monroe has one as well.
No, they have a planning commission.
But no, so they don't have a planner
Not
that
that I
works
know
for the
of.
city.
Not that I know of.
The city manager is fulfilling that role right now.
Okay, so it's a dual role. But ideally, it would be better to have an independent planner advising the planning commission. Okay.
I have a question. This came up, Adair has, done a lot of work in a lot of areas already. What if we could facilitate for the smaller communities to get together so they can share their experiences and their ideas, which are specific to their communities, right? Instead of us telling them what to do, maybe they can help each other and we can just facilitate that. It keeps us a little bit out of their business, so to speak, or the perception.
Well, it did sound like at one point, I think it was Joe Kirby was getting together with all of the city managers of these outlying areas and facilitating a discussion. And now with transitions and so forth that may have been temporarily interrupted, it may be worthwhile suggesting that there seems to be interest I know Steve Martinenko and Pat Hare speak a lot.
Yes.
Yes,
They've got each other on speed dial. But I don't know if that's the case with others.
Thank you so much. A quick question that would be helpful to me coming into a situation is is there a transportation district? Is there a water district? Those overlays. I go into it and I don't know, so I have to guess because that changes the dynamics of that conversation a lot. I'm assuming that's information.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, is to have some sort of like socioeconomic spreadsheet of their infrastructure, assets, that type of thing. Couple of the communities don't really have that information either. So, we need to coordinate that well in advance, but that's good. And then, and yes, I remember that the county administrator, or I've heard a lot about those meetings, and I think that they were beneficial. Something that I brought to the county a couple months ago was one of the folks in our planning division, the League of Oregon Cities has been having small city meetings for many, many years. And it's a very tight-knit group of mostly city managers and or department heads. And so we have at least a planning division staff member that's now going to those quarterly meetings, and the county's never been represented there before. And they were absolutely thrilled to have us there because they have all these initiatives. It's not only an opportunity to provide additional services or to give whomever who's looking for a grant opportunity. And it's not all Benton County. Our Region 4 area is also Lynn County.
In Lincoln, I believe.
Part of Lincoln or all of Lincoln? Yeah, they might just be all coastal, but you're right. It's at least a portion of Lincoln. And it's a fantastic group where they network. They bring in state representatives from different organizations to give presentations, to give information about microloans and that kind of thing. So I'm really glad that we have an opportunity to be at the table because we are also service providers, and it gives us opportunities to kind of keep a thumb on the pulse of what's going on. So
I like that term, service provider. And I think that's, after interacting with Monroe, that probably is the attitude we should take. We're just here to help.
How about a segue into where we might, whether it be worthwhile to do another one of these, and if so, where might we prioritize the next one?
So Chair Fowler, might I make a couple comments before we segue?
Please.
So I really appreciate what everybody's saying, and the perspectives are great. It was a very interesting meeting to sit in on. Just a couple comments from where I sat. First, I saw a really engaged community, which was great. So we did we're a catalyst for that community engagement on a greater scale. Generally, I think, Chair Fowler, you did a fabulous introduction, but I think it was so early on and we hadn't really established why we were being there. So maybe I don't know how Monroe reached out to the community necessarily about this meeting. So kind of prefacing the reason why we're here. I'll just say on the most simplest of levels, a lot of folks have no real understanding. So back to Commissioner Wilson's comments about jargon, what is a comprehensive plan, right? What is periodic review? We are talking about things that most of the constituents in Benton County really are not going to have a sense of what those mean holistically. So can we package those a little bit better and identify really the purpose of why we're there? I think we fell into a lot of accidental assumptions. Like, I don't think there was anybody that was looking to, drive the meeting a different direction, but it certainly went different than what I had planned as well. So I heard Vice Chair came and say that as well. So just that, prefacing why we're there, what the purpose of the county is. And to that point, I would say the county, when we look at, so the home rule space of our incorporated city is well-defined and it's statutory. What is the county's role to that? And I'm going to lean back into the land use space of, we have the opportunity to really convene regionally conversations on some of the greatest impacts we might have as cities, but our boundaries bump up against the county. And for example, I know that Commissioner Struthers will know that from being on the city council in Corvallis. I know for Philomath, we had some of our major developments run right along of some of the county's major transportation roads. Matter of fact, we have the county roads within, they're kind of buffered by city roads. And we run into that space of transportation, for example. So the role of the county might be approached through convening regional transportation, regional water resources, regional public transportation, for example. How do we minimize the vehicle usage within our county by talking about what that greater public infrastructure might look like? We also have the ability to convene those conversations where the communities are talking that. So I heard folks talking about that as well. I think that's a benefit of where we can step in. I don't feel at all that we're there. So service provider, that was a term that was used. I think that's justified. But I don't know that, I didn't get the sense that people felt like we were intervening per se, as much as we are an additional resource and we're kind of that, I'll just use the word convener again. Something else for incorporated cities is each of our city governments are a little bit different. So we were talking who has planning centers. What does that structure look like? I would say that as we go into these communities, making sure that we invite our city councilors, of course, and our mayors, but also ensuring that our planning commissioners, so Monroe brings them together already, making sure that we invite our planning commissioners to these meetings, and also making sure any subcommittees that are relevant. So Philomath just put up a housing committee, for example, they should actually be invited by name, in my opinion. Make sure that they're aware this is happening. It's easy for meetings like this to get overlooked, or people just make assumptions that the greater community isn't to be a part of this. How do we lean into that space? And then one other responsibility that we have, an option to lean in that citizen involvement, is that areas of the county have our citizen advisory committees, I think we call them. I don't think they're councils. And we have some vacancies in that space. So are we carrying that message when we go out into the community as well? But overall, good feedbacks, just, why are we there? If we're talking and looking into wildfire and periodic review and code changes and housing, let's make sure we run that lane. I do think that having additional meetings would be beneficial overall. I know for me, I'd like to see these meetings also a little bit longer to allow for more feedback. So we have a set amount of time for comments from the group, and then we really open up and we make sure we have adequate time for feedback. I think there were a number of folks that would have been heard if we hadn't closed that meeting when we did last week.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No.
So thanks. I just wanted to take a quick moment to express a few thoughts and maybe follow up with some of the things that were said. The first thing I just wanted to touch on the question of city managers' involvement. I have spoken to Rachel about that, and there is a desire to get that going again. So I do think that we want to open up that outreach. I was here when Joe Kirby was facilitating those, and I do think that those would be very helpful. I think there's also, just to mention, just to follow up on it about Pat Deepa and the fact that we don't have that relationship anymore. However, I don't know where the conversation is right now, but there was discussion with the city of Philomath about creating a partnership between Philomath, because they were establishing a position in our place of after Pat left. So I don't know where those discussions have. If they're still going, but the idea of using Philomath to help Adair as well as Monroe. So I just wanted to put that out there. What I wanted to just real quickly address, though, and it might be a little bit of a segue into your next steps, is I heard a lot about in terms of purpose, and we all want to have the authentic listening and being able to really let the community speak. But I do think you have an opportunity here where we do have resources that have been provided to the county that can help for more of a facilitated type discussion. And again, I thought you were terrific in terms of facilitation, but what I mean by that, so that the planning commission can really be more engaged and active with the community, but you can be very intentional about what are the things that you want to get to and have those discussions that help us inform and ultimately get to the goal of a new comprehensive plan. So we're very pleased to have that discussion with you. And again, we're at a good time here with resources just now being granted to us. So as you think about your next community engagement, which I think is critical, perhaps that's an opportunity to really frame that up well. You know, Catherine talked about having the purpose for the meeting, and really what are the things that we want to accomplish. I also believe as part of that plan, someone spoke to having information available, because that's part of the technical assistance that we're able to pull together as well. So I know we were going to take a little bit from what we talked about earlier, but we'd love to be able to think about your next agenda and see if there's an opportunity for us to maybe dive into that a little bit to help and support you best as you go into the communities. And we can also provide you some information leading up to that maybe get your thinking a little bit about that. But again, overall, I just want to say it was talking to the members afterwards, there was a lot of appreciation for us being there and being engaged. And that's extremely important. But to get what you really want out of it and the community, we can talk about having some facilitation.
I would just like to follow up on Rick's comments. He said, although Pat is no longer working for the county, there are moves afoot to have similar roles in Philomath. My question was, what is that role? What do they do? I never knew. I never understood Pat's role.
I think that's a great question. And I think that was part of, bottom line was the intent was really to how do we support those smaller communities for providing the resources and the planning support that they need because they lack the capacity. I think over time, and again, this was prior to my time, but certainly I think that made scope creep a little bit in terms of, real clarity on exactly what the role was. But I think that there was, it all started with a very important and a need there, but I think it was just perhaps a little bit lack of clarity.
It raises a question for me, Mr. Krager, is that role, I followed the UGB expansion at Adair, and I understand that that particular planner was brought in to professionalize the process and help Adair move through that very complicated process. And by way of example, when they did the survey or prepared the necessary maps for the UGB expansion, there was a small part of that was forgotten. And it wasn't terribly critical. I mean, it is critical to the ultimate goal of the UGB, and it was fixable, but it required another step and another process. And it was just for a strip of land right on Riles Road, right before the highway. But I guess now that Adair has a professional planner that works for the city, is my understanding. It's not, I don't have his name in front of me, but where they are now in the process of approving a PUD for housing in that UGB zone to the south of Callaway Creek. And so, but in any event, just a quick segue to support a lot of what Commissioner Bisco had said was that I think that these listening sessions, and this one was our first, and I think that we stumbled in some areas, but I think that we excelled in others as well in order to see where our strengths, where our weaknesses are. And I don't know if it's too soon, but I understand that with the periodic or the voluntary periodic review, that there's a lot of listening sessions that are going to end up having to occur during that process, but that the consultant that's hired to prep all of that helps the commission do that. I guess that's my question, because I'm wondering if some of that can also, I mean, if some of it can be gleaned before it moves into the voluntary periodic review period, that we can use some of that information ahead of time for additional listening sessions with other communities before the voluntary review. And I don't know if those are tools that we can access.
Yeah, so a comment that maybe what we should do is since this is a working session in fairly free form, is Vice Chair Heyman's subcommittee on code and periodic review and the updating of these Benton County code, the comprehensive plan, and a bullet there is the Planning Commission is a citizen engagement. I've forgotten the exact term of ours, citizen involvement, citizen engagement, which falls under this subcommittee. At the same time, I know the professional staff is working on the periodic review, has a grant, is able to pull together resources in order to do this. Maybe we can have a kind of a straw dog conversation which couples the subcommittee with the professional staff resource and perhaps target one of the next sessions in an unincorporated area, so the jurisdictional boundaries are much more clear. And we can satisfy an objective of that Vice Chair Heyman already said, he'd like to get some input. The professional staff wants to get input on the periodic review and the comprehensive plan. Use that as the objective, and perhaps making a presumption is looking at the Alsea area, which we have understood from Eddie Provost previously is desirous of a visit from the county to come in and listen. So that's a little bit obtuse, but if we can find the intersection of those vectors, maybe that's where we put together the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Ms. Hughes.
Would you like a summary of where we're at on that side? Okay, so Eureka, it's fantastic. I mean, it's really, where we've been churning towards is utilizing this extremely valuable body and skilled body to be a tool for the periodic review outreach as facilitated by the contractor. So where we're at right now is we have we've we have a contract for the money, and now we have an RFP out that identifies basically highlights the qualifications and different strategies and scenarios that we would like a contractor to consider that would be effective. And we really focused on inclusivity and diversity, technology, multi-generational outreach, different types of media. And so that's really the emphasis. We really want to take our public outreach to the next level. And that's what our expectation is for this contractor. So we're going out multi-state to see if we can attract the right fit. So in about 3 weeks, we should be going through the selection process for that. And at that point, we would then be looking at a strategy for the public outreach. And from that strategy would be a work plan. And that those 2 steps with basically an iterative coming back and developing a set of recommendations for moving forward with whatever subset of planning goals that we want to attack. So we won't have the resources in periodic review to do goals 1 through 14 plus the Willamette Greenways 15. But these listening sessions and the public outreach will probably identify 3 to 4 of our top periodic review ideas, issues, what have you, or goals to work on, and then be able to put a work plan together to, kind of attack those over the next 2 to 3 years. So I would think that, or I would recommend that this body just take a quick pause and wait for that contractor to come on board, to be able to work with them, give them feedback on your intentions, and then be able to dovetail those 2 processes together as we move forward. And we'll have some resources.
And I guess I would just add, you probably always get nervous when you hear the word pause. You continue to have.
Sorry.
And we all have been in government, I can understand. But let me say, we absolutely, was a high priority. We're putting this on a fast track. We also would love to invite any of the commissioners that would like to be part of the evaluation process for the contractor. While we're waiting on the contractor, though, there's still work I think that we can do and we want to do. So I don't want anybody to think we would lose momentum, because you guys are certainly, wanting to get out there, and we want to support you in talking to the communities. We don't want to delay on that any longer than we have to, but we also want it to be valuable for you to get the information that you need, get all that, be able to collect all that. So I guess I'm just saying my personal commitment to ensure that we put this on an absolute fast track to get the contract through, but I also don't want to slow down. I'd love to take advantage of the next meeting, whenever that will be, to start some of that.
Well, I'd imagine much of this is going to be in Vice Chair Hayman's subcommittee rather than the full committee. And so if the subcommittee, especially Andrew and Greg, can meet with the professional staff during this process.
We're working on that. We'll stretch.
Yeah, well, that's always the
Staff.
Mr. Cash.
Was your medical procedure cloning yourself? I was hoping you were doing.
You say that would be so unfortunate.
This pause might be an opportunity to work on materials development. The communities and the residents of the different communities and of the county at large. I'm dovetailing off of what several people have said here. But things like org charts, lists of definitions of terms or jargon, whichever they might be, clickable lists leading to resources. Because this is truly a unique opportunity in many different levels to create the future path towards the future for all of the county. I think people really are going to get engaged and involved. I also think that it's a shame, and there was a hint of this at the meeting in Monroe. It's too bad when people, even when they're trying to get informed, right? They're coming to the meetings, they're doing their reading, and they still have to rely on someone else to provide them with guidance to what's the best path. And I know you can't create 20 years of experience in community development, by giving somebody a resource list. But I know my community would benefit from all of that. And I know it's just one more thing for somebody to have to do, but it would provide almost an underpinning for future conversations throughout the county if people can easily find their way to the pertinent information that they can bring to the processes. The other thing is, before meeting, I don't know what the procedure has been, or if one has even been developed, before going out to the communities, making sure that there's enough outreach with community leaders, interaction before the meeting takes place to understand what the community portion might be, and how that can fit with the planning commissions. It could literally be 2 mini meetings, right? There could be the portion that's the community letting you know what they need, and hey, here's what we've got going on. We've got this exciting project. We hope you're going to really dive into it and help us. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Cash, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, and I don't want to stop, but you've really hit on some. As a former social worker, one of the things that we had to do was something called active listening. Mm-hmm. And it just dawned on me that at our gathering, which I think in structure and in presentation was spot on, mm-hmm. but I think the public came with a different expectation. Yes. And that came through in many of the comments, and it comes through crystal clear in the ones that got sent to you. And that maybe it's, they don't want us coming in and I hate to use this term, sorry, mansplaining everything to them. Instead, coming and saying, what are your needs? What are your goals? What are your dreams of your community for that community portion? And then the leaders are there simply to say, this is how much it's going to cost, and this, et cetera, et cetera. So that there's some some realism brought into it. But I think that it's still coming and doing some of that active listening, and maybe the next session and the next one that you plan, Chairman, that as Commissioner Cash has pointed out, is maybe it's structured in a way where we're listening to the community first and then the leaders second. I don't know.
Depends.
But anyway.
It might even vary from community to community.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Lee.
So this is great. And it's pulling together a variety of thoughts that led me to ask about the role of Patrick Deepa. And it is one of the comments that I've heard, and I don't remember if I put it in my list, is like, it's all talk. You come here and you listen, but so what? Well, you go away and nothing happens. So that was why I was wondering about the role of Patrick Deepa and helping Monroe. Because, at that meeting in Monroe, it was identified that there are challenges, staffing challenges, and what can the county do to help? And I think that's another thing that needs to be made very clear. Why do you want to go and listen? What's the difference? Can you do something? I think that needs to be made just as clear as, what do we want to hear what you have to say? Well, so what? What are you going to do about it?
There's something I've been observing in meetings too. The formal meeting process is very intimidating to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What if we had a less formal portion of our meetings where we could just chit chat with people, because they tend to get there late, maybe after the meetings, and set people up so they know that they don't have to go to a microphone and speak, but maybe they can, ask questions. Because the woman that I was talking to at the end, she just didn't have any idea of the process at all. And was very frustrated because she didn't know when she was going to speak or how she was going to speak or why we were there. And so a lot of the conversation was, oh, we're just here to listen, right? This is between you and the city on what happens. This is between your elected officials. You'll have time to comment soon. There'll be a public portion of this. Just kind of reassuring her. And I see that in all meetings, right? Where some people are brave and they come angry. They're really brave when they're angry. But if we can get like a less stuffy, for lack of a better word, moment for people to really ask those questions, I think it would be really helpful.
So that leads me to another thing. Linda, the Ford Family Foundation came to our community and brought with it lessons about tools for meetings such as this. There's a whole lot of tools that result in people getting up or first a quiet time so people can write on sticky notes like when we did the Alpine Community plan, whatever it was called, we sat quietly and wrote on sticky notes what we value. And then we all got up and put our sticky notes on pages around the room that were, and then, oh, well, these are all alike, we all value the same thing, just worded differently. What do we want to change? Same kind of, it's an activity base. It's a tool to break down those barriers and increase communication and get people up and interacting. And there was a great deal of interaction. For instance, there was a poster-sized board, and we were supposed to put our sticky things up, and people were waiting in line to put their sticky thing up and chit-chatting, and it was, it was all great. So there's communication tools that are intended to achieve just what Liz was describing.
Yeah.
And exactly what a facilitator will help us do.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
So sorry, Chairman, that's a lot on your plate.
Well, it's not on my plate at all. My objective for this conversation was simply to sustain the momentum. It's so hard to get off the dime, because how long have we been talking about community engagement? It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
At least, and probably longer than that. And that's why I keep using this term, launch and learn. We did lots of things, not perfectly, but now we've launched and we've got an implicit obligation to continue. And so what I'm suggesting is let's talk about this intersection of the comp plan periodic review, the strategic look at Benton County Code where it's not meeting the expectations of the community, and the broader objective of citizen engagement around things like housing. Can we take that, intersect it, create a nexus for our next meeting, and then simplify to the extent that we can? And simplifying probably means we don't go to Philomath, because that's going to be home rule and jurisdictional issues and so forth. Maybe somewhere like Alsea, where, again, fortuitously, we had heard that there was appetite for such a thing. If there's not, maybe we look somewhere else.
Well, we were told a year ago if we were to go out to Alsea, we were all promised spaghetti dinner.
Oh, that's right, we were. Who was that? That was one of the planning commissioners.
No, that was yes, Eddie.
Promise on spaghetti.
Yeah.
Promise.
I have a question. So Alsea brings up the unique situation where I don't understand planning of unincorporated areas as well as I do how we interact with the incorporated areas. And that was one of my questions. So maybe as part of the setup, before we go out to Alsea, we understand what the differences are. I think that would be super helpful because the rules are different.
Right, and I think if we bump it up to this kind of 30,000 foot level, we heard a lot of feedback that we need to have much tighter objective and be able to communicate what is our objective by going out. Another thing that I've written down is we used to do, anyone in a large organization, in addition to understanding corporate seagulls, understands the notion of a primer.
Prep meetings?
Yeah, and there's a primer.
Yeah, yeah.
When I would go somewhere, my staff would give me one sheet.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, now I'm conversant. I can walk into this group and I know who the players are, I know what the jurisdictional boundaries are, I know the cultural sensitivities. It's just that one page primer. and
All
we
the
walk in
senators
with
get
it.
it, everybody gets
Yeah,
it.
that could
That's
be
pretty
very
standard
helpful.
stuff. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, and so that gets to what you were describing about, well, is this unincorporated, incorporated, where does code apply, where does it not apply, and so forth. So that's the second thing. And the third thing that I really resonate with is facilitated informality. Because these hearings, and I'm guilty of it because I use honorifics and surnames, where that's intimidating to a lot of people. It's intended to be respectful, but it is intimidating to a lot of people. And Commissioner Lee mentioned this, where you've got this horseshoe and then you've got this gallery behind. Are you in the in crowd or the out crowd? So how do we create an environment that is more forthcoming to participation? So those are really the 3 at 30,000 feet level that I kind of took away from our conversation, that we need to do better next time.
I like that.
And even possibly a prep meeting where we go, okay, Nick, go ahead, stand up, pretend. Okay, did we segue to the next presenter appropriately? Should we have asked other questions? We can do some handoff practicing and that kind of thing too.
Choreography is important.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to audio visual.
I think it'd be pretty easy for it to say, we're going to run this meeting informally. Normally we wouldn't, but you know.
There is the impediment of people who participate virtually. It does create an impediment there. I think that should be acknowledged, but I don't know what to say other than that.
I would just like to say, I know I'm the new kid on the block, so I don't know what led up to the meeting in Monroe, what prep I might have missed out on, before I was part of the equation. But you guys did just what you said you were going to do that night. And if as a body, with your longer perspective than mine, you didn't find what happened there valuable, I can't speak to that. But I can say that it wouldn't be unreasonable, in my opinion, to understand that there would be a meeting where you're just getting to know the community. And the goal is to get to know the community. And then the next step is to go, okay, we heard a lot about that 6-inch sewer pipe. We heard a lot about that filtration system, that he's down there in the middle of the night kicking with his, right? You know what's going on there. I do anyway. He's down there in the middle of the night, kicking that thing to get it to turn back on. So anyway, it's able to see, you become able to see what the needs of the community are. They're expressing them. And then maybe you can circle back around and say, here's what we can do. Because the answer might be, actually, we can't do anything, but we can help you build some capacity by doing this to empower you to do what your community needs to do. Until you know what they need help with, it's hard to help. And even when you know what they need help with, there might not be a thing that can be done about it from the perspective of, from our perspective. So I think you guys did a bang-up job with the meeting. You did exactly what you said you were going to do at the beginning. It's too bad that people thought it was about people coming out to commute into Corvallis. I can see why people maybe ended up with that thought process. It's kind of logical, but it must not have been clear enough that we were there to create a partnership that didn't have anything to do with trying to get something from them, but rather had to do with what can we work on together? What can we offer to help your community thrive?
They definitely have a disconnect, I think.
Well, they have history, and that wasn't
I think
discussed.
that's what a
And
lot of comes
I think
through,
that,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, there's a disconnect in our community there for sure.
And add what Sarah was saying, it's funny, we actually had 2 social hours on the front side and the back side.
Yeah.
We did. And it was very genuine.
Yep.
But on the front side, I was more worried about eating than to go, oh, I should have asked a few of those front-loaded questions on the folks instead of just focus on. But there's some social time that if we had the right focus going, hey, sit next to a community member and go, hey, what do you think about this pizza? And get some conversation going. We could
Maybe mix us up. Maybe we don't all sit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kind of have the objective of sprinkling us
Sit next to
about.
somebody you don't know.
Because that's kind of what we did.
I did want to just mirror that with Commissioner Cash. You're not the only new person, because I feel still very new, only having been brought on since last August. So I think that in some measure that, yes, what I saw was, I think, from that higher level was that actually went pretty well.
Yes.
I mean, but that there are other things that could have, that could be communicated better. But so that's why I'm always reviewing my handbook.
So in the interest of time,
Sure.
To try and wrap this up with some next steps, what if the next step is that our code subcommittee Greg and Andrew work out times to meet with professional staff to kind of put together a set of objectives that are consistent with periodic review or consistent with strategic code review. And if an ed subcommittee wants to be involved in terms of is there community outreach, see how many of these becomes burdensome.
Okay.
See how many we can fit into one meeting and begin to lay a framework around kind of these high-level objectives. How far can we go with these? And then as facilitator is contracted and on board, then we can start working through what is the appropriate timing for our next meeting. And then do we have broader kind of pre-meeting reviews? I am just a little sensitive to incorporating the entire planning commission into that because these need to be public meetings and it becomes a little more challenging to do detailed planning. And so maybe if our subcommittee lead can be our liaison, and that way not everything has to be done in the context of a noticed public meeting, but bring it back to us ahead of time so we know what our roles are and so forth.
Commissioner or Chairman, is it possible that the subcommittees could, especially after, say, a process where they've met with staff or whichever committee, that they can simply update you and then you can share that with us, the wider commission?
Do you need a test on last month's public meeting?
Yeah.
That would be a public meeting.
That's right. That would be a public meeting. Sorry.
And so that's why if we do a lot of the pre-work detail in the context of the subcommittees.
Okay. Got
and
it.
then bring it back in a work session.
Yep.
So that we understand our role.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, was not so that it was being, not that it was being ex parte. That's not what I was looking at ex parte. I was looking at as soon as practical after activities have occurred, that it can be shared with the commission. So,
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Another idea, this just is off the top of my head, but once your facilitator's in line, maybe have him lead a meeting using some of the tools that he could suggest for us to be using out in our outreach.
Yeah, and then I don't know exactly how all of what we learned in March about public meetings, because I really like the ideas of being kind of informal, but as a public meeting, we have certain obligations to achieve during a public meeting. And so that may limit, I don't know, but it may limit some of the facilitation flexibility, but that would be something to discuss.
If there's quorum, there's some.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
Good. Any other wrap-up comments on, this was kind of the April 30th kind of debriefing and postmortem. And we got a little bit of your subcommittee in it. Do you want to, do you have other kind of updates or questions that you'd like to?
No, I think, well, I appreciate that. You know, again, I think where you sort of directed us is exactly where we want to go. It's just been really had a hard time finding time to do it. I think that we'd be sensitive to that. But clearly, you know, the defined role of the subcommittee incorporates work of the staff. You know, we have three basic things. We're trying to get the code online and queryable. That's subcommittee doesn't do it, but we want to be an understanding of that work. Then there's a sort of a process of updating and coordinating and incorporating state action into existing code, which is just a mess and a lot of work. And again, I think the subcommittee wants to be engaged with that, be aware of it, but it's not really subcommittee work. It's one of our goals. The third one, which is then how do we gather new information from the variety of stakeholders out there in the county to help us to better understand where code could do a better job of addressing perhaps new issues, perhaps issues we didn't think about when code was written 20 years ago. You know, we have different ideas about climate. We have different ideas about fire risk. You know, we have different ideas about a lot of things that we did 20 years ago. And how does that get represented in the ways in which we update code? That's where I think the community really needs to be engaged, and at a variety of levels. I mean, it's not just talking to, maybe we have, it's not necessarily just talking to leadership. I think we need to be careful about relying on, the usual suspects and telling us what they need, because I think we sense in Monroe that, that may not be representative of the community's sense of what needs is. We have to find a way of doing that. I really hope that the facilitator will help us. So how do we figure out a way of gaining the input of the people who are probably resistant to providing input or afraid to provide input, and therefore we really don't capture broader interests of the community. So that's going to be a critical part, I think, of the community outreach. So we just need to coordinate that. I don't think there's any disagreement. I think we just need to figure out how to bring those pieces together. I'm excited to do it. We'll find a time.
Thank you. Our other subcommittee is on regional housing. So Commissioner Fulford, would you like to give us an update?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll be sensitive to time as well. This was some of the slides that we're going to do in Monroe. And so I think the key pieces are down a little bit. So I'll hit those. So you guys seen the purpose statement. We have a new thing on rent burdening, which I'll show you here in a second.
Define it.
Yeah, benefits and risks, and really the progress we've made on socialization and one of our communication methods, which is a fast fact sheet, which I think, Sarah, you mentioned as well. It's like, hey, where can they go get kind of an update quickly on what we're doing? So let me cruise on. So this one here, you've seen it before, really, meeting short-term and long-term broad housing needs. This Benton County being the second most rent burdened county in Oregon, Corvallis is the #1 rent burdened city in Oregon. Linda, can you click on this for me? I don't know if I can do that or not. Yeah, it's a bad link. And make sure we're aware, if we can go full screen on that for a second, is it's severely rent burdened, which, most of the time when you're spending for rent, it's supposed to be like 30% of your pay is supposed to be going to rent. When you're severely rent burdened, it's 50% of your pay goes to rent, right? Corvallis is so bad that if you scroll up just a little bit, you can see our circle here. We are actually at 36% above 50% be severely rent burdened. Let me scroll up and see. I think it's this right here. With 30% of rent households being severely rent burdened, Corvallis ranks the highest rent in Oregon. So you can see this here. If you're above the 25% line, you're severely rent burdened. And you can see Corvallis right here. We're at 36, the highest in the state. What's that?
We're first.
We're first. We're #1. And so obviously we're in, can we go back to that statewide picture up here? You can see we're kind of eating up everything here. That's why we're #2. I think Multnomah County is #1, but city-wise, you can tell our circle is bigger than anybody. If you scroll down a little bit on that, you can see a few other cities down there, but they're, Ashland.
Yeah. Excuse me, are those dots indicative of
the amount of rent burdened over 15%? It's actually the severe rent burden over.
Thank you.
So yeah, you can see our circles around. Anyway, I saw this today. I was looking through it, kind of trying to get some facts for today, and I went, oh, that tells a pretty good picture of where we're at. And if you scroll back up, I think the law states cities that are over 25%, whoops, where'd it go? Oh, this one here. Oregon cities with a population over 10,000 have new requirements if their city meets the condition of severely rent burden. So we actually have a law that forces us to engage. So let's go ahead and close that one out.
That's cities, right?
That's cities.
Right.
I did a search on counties, but the city one came up and I thought it was pretty So let's cruise on to the next. Any questions on that one?
Region, what is the region?
Oh, I'll hit that one just a second. So it's actually Benton County and all the counties around it, but I have a picture right here. So let's go to the next, that's me. I think we've seen this one, benefits risk to addressing at the regional level. Here's some progress markers for us. The committee was identified in February, right? And this is the socialization that's going on today. And I'll show you a slide on that here in a second. We're meeting with a variety of partners, be it OSU, be it CSC, be it the governor's office or whatever. So that's going on right now. We adopted a charge in March for the Regional Housing Subcommittee. Right? And this one here is develop a communications content strategy, which is kind of ongoing right now. We have two things. One is a fast fact sheet, which I'll show you kind of a mock-up here in a second. And the second one is I met with Rhonda Willie, who's doing the website. And she actually came up with the fast fact sheet as well. And so that's sort of ongoing. Once this kind of shakes out, we're sort of in the stall phase right now on the socialization piece. Once that one shakes out, we'll start moving to setting agendas, hopefully doing some of that active waiting and prioritizing and all that good stuff. And then those two. The next one. So this is progress on socialization. The EF, Liz Irish and Darren, we met with ELCD, Brad Smith's Corvallis Housing, SME, OSU, CSC, the governor's office, skirting. Hub Village developer, that was pretty interesting. This bunch of tiny homes in Albany. Mary Kyle, 1,000 Friends came down, and Michael Anderson of Sightline, who writes, he's a writer who writes about policy at the state level. And here's some other folks that we're queuing up right now. Next one. Here's the regional question you asked. So we're Benton County, we got Lynn, a little bit of Lane, Lincoln, Polk, Marion, all around this. Because if you ever look at a heat map of who's coming in and who's going out and where everybody's working, it's pretty much all this region. Right? So this is the sort of a mock-up of fast fact sheet. Some place where people can come and get all the progress and major issues. When I sat down with Shannon on this, she has a completely different idea. More stats, more census, more numbers, and things that you can actually automatically pull from census and stuff that can track it. So she's actually thinking about that quite a bit, hopefully. But I thought it was a good idea, right? One place to go, because you can look at a charter statement, you can look at project slides, but you have one sort of summary of all the things that are going on. It's probably best. I think that's it. So anyway, making progress, meeting with a bunch of folks. We're socializing quite a bit and making progress. So, questions, thoughts? Sarah?
And on that last slide that we saw, you said that no contractor could afford to build a unit at that cost. Could you define unit, please?
I think
Single-family housing.
single-family housing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the numbers I was shown was a family of 4. And I think the developer, I think the AMI was $68K for a family of 4. And I think the house cost was $147K. So a lot of those are going up in Corvallis. No, not at all. So it's, they're all super expensive and no developer is going to touch a $147,000 house. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did.
Okay.
It just said unit. I didn't know what kind of housing unit you.
Oh, single family, yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
The list that we had for socialization, I saw obviously had the governor's office, and that's good. I think, how much work or is there any focus on reaching out with Oregon Housing Community Services? And I say that just because we can talk about housing, but what we're really reaching here is affordable housing. And how do we start to get into those tax credit programs, those big investors? So I don't know, has there been conversations that has started, particularly with the director of housing and community services, and how we might be able to leverage some of the investment opportunities that are coming our way?
So we prioritized who we were going to reach out to first. We have an extensive list that's bigger than that one, and this was just the queued up portion of it. So there's not going to be any stone unturned. We were at an affordable housing conference in Portland, and that's when we ran into Mary Kyle McCurdy, 1,000 Friends, and some of the players at DLCD. Were able to engage with them a little earlier than we thought we would in the process, and so that's why they were expedited to the beginning. But there isn't anybody that we are not talking to, because this is a ecosystem of housing that we need, right? So all stops have to be made. Yeah.
Well, to the degree that you want any help on that, I have a pretty wide connection of affordable housing through my career.
Cool. That'd be great.
With the department and trying to make those connections. And I just know you can't deal without the deep pockets in terms of equity investors. And I think about housing here in Benton County, it's not, we need more of those developers that can kind of come in and help us and give them leverage those tools.
We're also talking about the big players, the Samaritans and Oregon State. They own a lot of land in the city and the county. There's a part that can be played in and considered into bringing the overall cost of housing down. And we've also talked about them contributing dollars to hiring somebody internally for the county, maybe, supplying our own version of our grant to kind of help the staff out to proceed on this item, right? And I think that that's all realistic. So all of it's out on the table. We do not expect that the cost should necessarily just be passed on. I think that in the situation with Oregon State University, they only have 2,500 housing units for their students. Their students are occupying a lot of the houses that the residents would occupy, right? So we have to hold them accountable to their responsible role in this, gently but firmly as well. And so we're really going, okay, where do you fit in the big picture? And what do we all think when we sit down and talk about this, what each individual's responsibility is into solving this problem?
It's very inclusionary. So
Yeah.
The socialization piece, normally I was like, boom, boom, let's get it done, let's move on. And Darren was like, no, we got to allow a lot of time. Because every time we meet with somebody, it's who else have we not included that you would
And what else should
recommend?
we think about?
So your list would be great,
Yeah.
obviously.
If you have any other players to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to provide you a lot of the different folks that over the years that could really maybe help give some technical assistance in terms of ways to approach, because there's so many creative ways to do affordable housing in the community. So.
Well,
Sounds good.
And the governor's office is on board. I know the DLCD is looking to expand and have a new housing advisory group that's coming up. I think they're really focused on the 30 hires that they're doing and the administration portion of 1537. But there is a lot of opportunity for us to really participate in not only rulemaking for our region, but having an impact on the state as well. And I don't think we should overlook that. I think that this could be a really fun time for all of us to be part of that.
Become a model going forward for the governor to leverage.
Affordable housing is a really good tool.
Yeah.
Some folks that can come in and help provide.
That'd be great. Yeah. Other questions, Andrew?
Just a quick clarifying, because I feel like I heard you say something that my brain was like, that doesn't sound right. Did you say, she's only housing 2,500? Because I thought it was closer to 5,000.
No, it's officially 2,500. I think maybe the new grad housing will increase it, but we just met with Paul Odenthal and he said 2,500.
Is that rooms or beds? They double up and triple up a lot of rooms too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at my notes,
Okay.
but he was pretty specific on the 2,500.
That was students, that wasn't professors. There's another 800 for professors
Yeah, there's,
or teachers.
they have, in fact, we were joking because we have employees that live in Sweet Home. They have employees with Sweet Home. And while we were there, we were coordinating like a a car ride
Carpool.
share for the employees, because that's where people are moving now, is Sweet Home to work in Corvallis. So super interesting.
Thanks for that update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
A couple more minor topics. One has already been on our radar for a long time. I've been giving some thought to what would it look like when we get a complex land use application which incorporates and motivates a good number of the community to comment. And of course, the exemplar is always Republic Services. And we're preparing for an application. And I've got a straw dog schedule and outline that I wanted to pass along to everyone and get feedback on. Because when it comes, we've got to be prepared for it. And so it's likely, if that application were received imminently, that we would be looking at the middle of August in terms of when the planning department would be able to bring it our way with a staff report and so forth. So what I've been looking at is a 3-day or 3-evening style. The first evening would be the staff report, other government agencies, the applicant time, and perhaps, if there is time, because I expect we're going to have lots and lots of questions of the staff report, if there is time, begin public testimony. So that all would be the first evening. And the background on this is the last Republic Services, which is the best example of a complex application that incorporated a lot of public input. Our first meeting, I think it lasted 4.5 hours. And so we started at 7 in the evening. We didn't finish until 11:30 in the evening. Those are not real productive meetings. And so the context of this is, can we keep it to between 2 and 3 hours when people still have their attentions and their minds are still engaged? So the first evening, staff report, other government agencies reports, the applicant testimony, and perhaps begin public testimony. And I imagine that would be between 2 and 3 hours. Very short on its heels, and I would imagine we would publicly notice all 3 of these meetings at once, so they're on the schedule. Second meeting would be devoted to public testimony. So we would just go as long as there is, and perhaps we would need a third meeting. Because at the previous Republic Services, we had 2 very, very full nights of 4.5 hours each. And I expect an application, if it came, still hypothetical, but if it does come, we can expect at least that much public input on this application. So what I was looking at, and this would be a little departure from the way we typically schedule things, which is a first and third Tuesday, but to keep things kind of moving along, I was looking at a Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So essentially have 3 meetings within one 7-day period, which would accommodate significant public testimony, and hopefully we could accommodate it in that 3-day period. We would also anticipate at the end of the 3 days, we would leave the record open for written testimony only, which is then another 7 days. Give the applicant 7 days from that to absorb. This is going to be a voluminous record, and so it's only respectful to give them a week after the close of the written record to develop their response. And then have our dedicated deliberation meeting 2 weeks after that. Yeah. Do nothing on that evening other than deliberate. No more public testimony. The record will have been closed, and give us all time, again, because of the voluminous record, rather than getting it the night of, can we have a week to absorb all of the incremental written testimony, review some of the oral input, and so forth, and develop our own thoughts as to how it might go forward. So that's, if this all came to pass, that would be August 15, 20, and either 21 or 22. And so that would be the public hearings. And given that it's August, I wanted just to check in to see how many people are going to be away from town in that window.
I think it's the last one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll, yeah.
I think I'm traveling on the last day. I'm gonna have to double check.
So for me, I'm in Rockaway Beach on the 20th and 21st, but that's not something where I could, attend remotely or come back early because it's a family type of thing with my in-laws. So it's something I could come back early from.
Well, and certainly with the public testimony evenings, participation remotely is absolutely permissible, and you'd be able to do that. It'd be a little more challenging to make questions of the person providing testimony, but it would work.
I'll have to check my calendar. I don't have it here. I think I'm leaving the country the 20th or the 21st. I'm not sure. So I'll get it to you.
Mine was August 25th through September 5th, so I think I'm good.
Great. At least it preliminarily sounds like we can construct a quorum between in-person as well as remote participation. Certainly the first meeting, having as many people here, because that's where you get the opportunity to ask questions around the staff report of the applicant, of other government agencies and so forth. So that one would be very beneficial to have as many of us as possible in person. Receipt of the oral testimony from the public, that can be accomplished remotely a little bit more easily.
Could you remind me how long we have with the staff report at the very beginning of the process?
How long we have?
How much time do we have to review the staff report before there are any public hearings?
Oh, generally we get 7 days.
7 days.
We generally get it 7 days in advance of the public hearing.
Yeah, that's the standard practice.
Yeah. So we will have a week to review it and write our questions down. So I imagine we will have plenty of clarifying questions around the staff report.
Now, you said it was standard. So if we notice the documentation's this thick, we could get 2 weeks to review it, for example?
Yeah, it might have to push the meeting out. So, because you have 150 days, the first 30 days, and then you have to have like 2 to 4 weeks for your agency referral partners to review it. And then you need to have a certain amount of time for the public to review it. So it's a very structured process. And I like the idea for efficiency purposes for sure. And so that, it's inclusive, clearly the intention. I think we want to check with legal because deviating from the standard procedure from a perception perspective or potentially a legal perspective could be problematic, but I do appreciate the idea for sure.
Well, that's exactly why we're bringing it up now.
Okay.
Because I think we would all appreciate getting all of the testimony kind of in a package and all in a time frame where we can kind of keep it in our short-term memories and think about it. Whereas if we have to wait 2 weeks between public sessions, or if those public sessions go on for 4.5 hours, we just don't absorb it as well. And so perhaps as an action, perhaps we could touch bases with county council and see if we would be able to do 2 or 3 meetings within a short period of time, as long as we noticed them up front and all the standard kind of requirements. But that also means we're consuming a fair amount of time after the public hearings with simply getting the additional written record, the applicant response, and our time to absorb it in advance. And so it changes our kind of our time cycle a little bit. It has a flurry of activity kind of concentrated with the gathering of the record, and some time to absorb and read the record, and then a dedicated meeting for deliberation. Yeah, Andrew.
I I think that all makes sense. And I think long as we're publicly noticing what the schedule's going to be once we have that application, I don't think legally there's not a problem. Long as it's all out there for the public to see ahead of time. They know why, there's sort of that, the why behind it, because we want to make sure we have enough time for everybody to have their opportunity to say what they want through their community comments. And I think getting it a week advance is fine, because we will have plenty, at least for myself, we have that week to review it initially, ask questions at that first meeting with staff, with those agencies. And then once we actually get into deliberations, that doesn't cut us off from talking to staff or getting clarifying questions once we're in deliberations. So we still would have some time to even bring a couple of additional questions during those deliberations. So we have plenty of time.
That's the scope of the question.
Yes. Yeah.
As we all know.
Well, we can always ask, bring some of those questions ahead of time while the record's still open too.
During that.
We can always have, at the end of the community comments that one night, we can say, okay, for the last 15, 20 minutes, is there any additional questions from the planning commission to staff as we're building this record? So that way we can keep that sort of that open line of questions as well.
Okay.
Just a technical question. Is when that conditional use permit request drops, does it drop from Valley Landfill or from our public services?
Should be Valley Landfill because should be Valley Landfill because they are the owners of that property.
That's why I'm asking.
But the public services does business as Valley Landfill.
Okay.
And that's also when that application does drop, that's when the ex parte and everything goes into effect.
No, I understand that.
Okay, so that will be kind of the outline that I'll work with the shoots to implement. But I know with summer travel and vacations, but that looks like the time window that we would be targeting for.
So in other words, you're saying you do know that this application is coming and in that time frame?
I don't know what professional staff would like to say, but what we've previously been updated from Darren has been that the intention has been made clear that they are going to submit an application, and that application is becoming more imminent. We don't have a specific schedule. To my knowledge, we don't have an application that has dropped.
No, we're scheduling the pre-application meeting for the 2nd to 3rd week in June. And they anticipate, depending on the feedback that they get, a submittal beginning of July.
Okay. And then it's 30 days for professional staff to review?
So that kind of pushes into September.
It might, yeah.
It could.
Okay.
So
Those three meetings more condensed can be moved as needed.
yeah, right. It sounds like late August into early to mid-September, a number of people were articulating conflicts. I as well. And so I am very wary of late August to mid-September as being able to construct a quorum and have meaningful interaction. Oh, yes.
Dates again, please.
Well, right now, the dates that they're purely hypothetical, but the window would be Thursday, August 15, Tuesday, August 20, and either Wednesday the 21 or Thursday the 22. That's kind of the window, and it sounds like once we hit the 22, we lose our ability to put together a quorum.
Are the meetings at 7 p.m. still?
That was another question, because
Did we do it earlier?
We've now started our public hearings at 6. But I was also wondering, given the anticipated interest that might have from the public, we want to communicate that we're interested in getting their feedback. Do we want to have a couple of different times a day to accommodate those or is 6 to 9 o'clock a window that is sufficiently universal that we don't need to consider any other times of day?
I don't have experience to provide input, but
I would think 6.
If we start going in like during like normal work hours, then you're going to lose me because of my job.
Yeah.
I think so too.
We have been starting our public hearings at 6, and so I anticipate doing that for this as well. I don't know that we'd be able to sustain our 2-hour window. Again, I'm just anticipating the amount of questions that we have and the amount of input the public has. So I would anticipate 6 to 9 o'clock. Don't want to go any longer than that. And anticipate 3 days of establishing the record, with the exception, we'll hold the record open for additional written testimony for another week.
Okay. 7 days, okay.
So is the public aware that this is on the agenda, on the forefront? And because that was one of the comments or the sense that I got after going through the original Republic Service application, was that people felt that they did not have time they did the public brought a huge amount of really, really detailed, great information. It was a lot, but among those, they felt like they could have even done better if they'd had more time.
Oh, and so a couple of comments. It's still hypothetical since we do not have an application. And this process that I'm outlining would apply to any application that we anticipate complexity and significant public input. It departs from our standard practice of just scheduling one public hearing and then on an ad hoc basis at the end of the hearing, extending it or so forth. This would establish that we have multiple public hearings, and it would kind of establish a longer term calendar that we could all apply to. And I think it's going to apply to Republic.
I think getting to Evelyn's point with BCTT, and I'm looking at Liz to help me refresh my memory on this one. For the pre-application meeting, one of the recommendations coming out of that was to make that a public meeting, correct? Not where the public can comment on it, but
they can
observe.
comment, but they could observe and be part of. And I think you're right. We have to be as transparent through this process as possible. That's the best bet. And if there's any way we can do that, I think it would bode well for everybody.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like the meeting's not quite scheduled yet, but it's being talked about being scheduled sometime in June, correct? The pre-application meeting?
The pre-application is not going to be a public meeting.
Okay.
That's not a possibility.
And what's in our jurisdiction are the public hearings.
I was trying to get to it.
Well, yeah, and I agree. I think the whole point of BCTT was to say, okay, this is what people requested. They wanted to be heard, right? So if there's anything we can do to incorporate that, I think that would be helpful. I understand there's legalities and processes, but I do agree with Evelyn, Commissioner Lee. I think as soon as we have that pre-application meeting, we probably need to do some kind of public announcement. As fun as this is all going to be, the party that it's going to be, I think that would be best as well.
And the public engagement is going to be with us at the public hearings. And that's why we want to discuss this now. So we kind of agree upon what our process should be and get county council to say, yep, that's legitimate. You can do that. Because I think the avenue for public input is through our public hearings.
If I could just make a point to Liz and Andrew, is that I do understand that was posed as a potentiality before. And the reason why this staff doesn't support that is because the pre-application meeting is for the applicant to be able to have an open conversation about questions. Can we do this? Can we do that? And everything. It's a technical exercise and a safe place for both staff and the public. If we were to publicize that, that becomes open for public meetings law. And that means that all of the notes that we take are going to be potentially exposed to the public. They are all draft conversations. And so those could be exposed, and people may or would be inclined to, I think, naturally to comment or make public comments on the pre-application meeting, and that can't be part of the record, which would be frustrating for
Right.
people. So just in the spirit of transparency, really, is that we want to follow a standard process, that we're not giving the public, nor the applicant, nor staff any special treatment for this particular application than any other. We are responsible for maintaining, the same decorum for every single applicant that comes through, whether or not it's politically volatile situation. So that's the reason behind that choice.
Has it been done, or could it be done, that we review the recommendations from BCTT in regards to the next CUP and say, maybe we can incorporate this, but we can't incorporate that into the process?
No, we can't use any information from that process in consideration of the conditional use permit. That being said, I imagine there's going to be a whole slew of ex parte contact, because you all have been exposed to this application before and you were exposed to that parallel process. So we'll want to get that all on the table, and we may even consider putting the entire record from that into it.
That was the conversation that we had with county council, is let's bring that entire BCTT into the record.
Right, but in terms of like contemplating that process, it's not directly related to the conditions of a conditional use permit for the application. So it's background information, but that should not be a part of the consideration.
And I understand, since you're saying, because that is not the current land use, oh my goodness, code. That's not the current land use code, and our decision has to be on the code itself.
Correct.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So while I understand that, this begs the question, why did we do BCTT if we can't consider it in the process? Why did we even do that process then?
I don't have the answer.
I mean, I don't, right? I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Catherine, because you were there for the whole thing.
The way you phrase that, I think raises a lot of concerns from us. And I think our understanding was there are certain sections of BCTT which speak directly to any application for a landfill in that area. For example, the history section. That's directly speaks to the quality and characteristics of the area. So that's certainly pertinent to our consideration. Now, there's lots of things like the performance to last conditions of approval that, no, we can't consider those.
Yeah.
So those are off the table.
Yes.
And so perhaps, we've summarized in the bumper sticker to say, just put the BCTT work into the record. Maybe instead of saying that, maybe we need to extract from it those things which can be considered. And so the section on the previous compliance with conditions of approval, that would perhaps taint the conversation. So let's take that out. But the shared history, that so much work went into kind of the shared history.
9 months.
Yeah.
Right, 9 months. And there was a lot of community outreach about how the community wanted to be communicated with. And it just seems weird that we did that whole process and asked, and we can't even, you're saying we can't even use it now. So I'm confused. I would like to hear what Catherine has to say on this, because she was there for 9 months as well.
Thanks, Commissioner Irish, I guess, for that invite. I guess I would lean towards, I'm not sure what staff's recommendations are going to be, but Chair Fowler, there are, I agree with you in that there are certain elements of that do relate to the current process. The history being one of those. Maybe this is a space that we should get legal guidance on what we should be bringing forward. I too feel like there might be some challenges in moving the whole record forward, but also I don't know how you are going to look at the record, also look at all of the individual statements from the members of the BCTT work group. how are you going to decide what should or should not be? And does that put us in a legal space also where there may be challenges there too? I don't know. So not a legal expert. I don't have any recommendations except maybe leaning into that space to get some guidance. I do have the question of, my understanding is part of the reason we were doing that is to get a better understanding that historical space. And also that some of that would have some relevance moving forward. So what is that and how is that defined, I guess would be my question.
Well, I guess I'll make an ask then, specifically to Commissioner Irish and Commissioner Bisco, Commissioner Struthers, to the extent that you came kind of into the DCT kind of late. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all right. If you could each send me what you think is critical from the BCTT work to incorporate into the record, I'll construct a memo to County Council, which is also Planning Commission Council, and request these items and see if there's any issue with incorporating those items into the record.
And just a question, Chairman, this, I'm just trying to articulate when that CUP is made to the county, the previous CUP that was submitted and decided on is no longer part of this current record. Okay, that's just want to clarify.
I'll send out, I have a planning commission letter that what does the staff report include? Little primer and what's required to by the state law. That is something similar to what I sent Sarah earlier today for Alcy, but this is more specific. Okay.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, I was somewhat anticipating, probably not, but anticipating that this topic might have come up. And so I do have a primer, a 2-page primer on what the roles of the staff are, what the timeframes are, when things are posted, what a staff report includes and what it can't include.
Excellent.
Shirley?
Well, I don't know if this is appropriate right now. It might be appropriate later, but a good part that I remember vividly was the role of SWAC and DSAC. And I don't read the Corvallis newspaper. But one day I was at, a drugstore and there was a big headline and I don't remember anything, but what is that? What's going on with that?
Where is SWAC and what is the other one?
DSAC.
DSAC, yeah, SWAC and DSAC.
Conversation for a different time.
Is that a different conversation at a different time?
Would you like to address that?
Yeah, so at this point, I think everyone knows that DSAC has been on temporary status, and we are in the process right now, the commissioner in the process in terms of taking applications and reviewing them. So at this point, we're still reviewing the information to get that going. SWAC is my understanding, I don't have all the history on that, but that is currently suspended. Is that the best term for it? I don't know if that's was the official action, but there is no SWAC, at least at this point.
So we won't be getting information from them about their recommendation or whatever.
So at this point, we're still working with council in terms of deciding exactly what body will play that role. We'll have some more information, but there still needs to be that particular process in place. We just don't know exactly who that's going to be.
Yeah.
We're looking at the options at this point. So more information.
Quick question, semi-related. I know when I was talking to Darren, he was saying that out of the regional housing, we're going to produce a plan in September. Does the application from Republic become all-consuming for August and September, or will we still be able to have the professional staff work on the business plan, or is that just too much?
No, it's not going to affect our workflow. No.
Good. Thank you.
So keep in mind, hypothetical, but we're trying to put together, we've got a plan for all of this and the kinds of things that we need to get clearance from county council. This is good to plan ahead. So, yes,
Chairman, I just don't want to take up too much time, but this is just, this is not off topic, but just a learning question. because I had asked at maybe a previous work session. The staff sends us decisions on where the county has made planning commission decisions for landowners who've made applications for a variety of reasons. One of which and I'm just asking, the most recent one I reviewed was a property setback, the distance between the road and the front of the structure. And I'm just asking because in past experience on previous planning commissions that I've been on, when that type of request comes to the planning commission, that ends up being a legislative issue for the planning commission, but that's not the case for the purposes of the code here, I'm assuming.
For Coffin Butte application?
No. There was a recent land use decision made by the staff for a landowner.
Oh, it was administrative.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so just from past experience, something like a property setback, the distance between the required distance that the code says from the center line of the road or the edge of the road to the front of the structure has to be, I think for our county, it's 40 feet. They gave a variance for 30 feet. But that type of decision doesn't require legislative action on the part of the commissioners.
No, but each development code does it differently. So the threshold for administrative, quasi-judicial, and legislative are different from community to community. Most small communities, a lot of things go to the planning commission. Larger communities generally are saved for applications like replats, rezones, conditional use permits. And then the legislative decisions are zoning maps, text changes to the code.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's up to each community really where they set that threshold.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So I apologize because I hope I don't extend the meeting too much, but I want to respond to what Liz said, and I feel too, is the confusion about BCTT and the comment that I made earlier about Monroe. It's all talk. What can we have learned from the past from BCTT in being both transparent and sensitive to the public in this huge issue? And it would be really valuable to know that the lessons learned would be incorporated in this application process. And so I don't really know how it's going to be. And I would really feel badly if BCTT ended up not informing, not being sensitive, not allowing us to be sensitive to this issue. And so any clarity you can provide on that would be very helpful. I'm still confused.
Okay, yeah, I have not read BCT. It's
1,100 pages.
I know.
I read it all.
I've seen it. Yeah, and actually, and then also just to maintain optimal objectivity, nor have I read the last application. Because I think that is the most transparent thing for a planning official to do to maintain objectivity. And I do need to learn, there will be facts from that process. History is a perfect example. You will want to have a history section in your staff report that talks about facts. We don't talk about sensitivities in there at all. But facts of the history of previous code violations, everything of that nature will be included. And the applicant, it has read the 1,100 pages as well. And they have made a commitment to the county that they will be incorporating all of that. And they have a different simplified strategy to make sure that their application is the thing that reflects what, from their perspective, the values of the community in a much more sensitive way. It's their responsibility to address the sensitivities. It is not the county's responsibility. The county needs to stick to the criteria in the code and facts.
Right, but I guess I use the word sensitivity. I feel as though, I don't know, I guess I would like to be sensitive to the expressions of dismay that took place in the earlier application, expressions about opportunity to comment or timelines and things like that. Is that what you meant, Liz?
Yeah. I think my concern is that We did a huge event. We might as well have had a child in that 9 months. It was painful at times. And I'm not sure we were all particularly happy with what we produced. But my fear is the public's outlook on that process not being considered in this CUP will not be good. And I know that that's not your issue, and I'm starting to get clear in my head on that. But as far as transparency and communication and hearing the public and all the things we said we were doing as far as BCTT, when I hear that that won't be considered now, that's problematic, I think, for all of us, for having some relevance and being worth listening to, right? Like I don't know how to phrase it, but I think it's a little problematic, and we have to go into this knowing that if that's how it's going to play out, it's not going. I don't know how you feel about it, Evelyn, but I think there's going to be some
example of all talk, no action. Yeah.
Well, what I also want to be very sensitive to, we can control what we can control.
Right.
Yes.
And so within the confines of the planning commission, that's why I brought this up. I'm trying to be sensitive to BCTT and learn from the lessons of the first application, because a few of us who actually were in that process.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of learnings for the county to do.
Yes.
And perhaps we can provide some input.
Mm-hmm.
But let's make sure we focus on what we're going to do as a planning commission to meet the goals, what we heard, the feedback, and so forth from BCTT.
Yeah.
Can I just reflect back what you said, though, is that you're saying that the applicant is the responsible party that has to reflect all of the information that was gathered by BCTT in the next process. In other words, your expectation is that the applicant is going to try to reflect everything that was in the product of your work.
Here's my response to that one, which I think is great.
I'm just asking Petra if that's what she meant by communicating that her expectation of the applicant.
And the applicants made a commitment to make adjustments on the things that they failed to communicate accurately or didn't communicate, things of that nature. And when we go through that pre-application meeting process, we're going, the county, and this is hearsay because I wasn't involved, but there's going to be a very, not a different approach, but a very detailed, because we learned so much from that process, here's a good example. There's 7 different types of geological engineering studies, right? Mm-hmm. Do we know that the one that they supplied to us the first time was really the appropriate one for that type of landfill application? I don't know the answer to that question, but we have the answer to what we're expecting to see in a geological now. So, I mean, there's learning that's been had, but it's to inform facts and to make sure that the process is detailed, that we're hitting all the marks, that we are not including agency referral partners that may not have been involved the first time. So we have a list of 15 different agencies that we're inviting to this pre-application meeting, from Dogami to the DEQ. And I don't think that happened. Just in 20 years of land use experience and having processed many highly controversial applications, I hope that you all can trust in staff to present a highly professional, detailed presentation that's simplified and does not get confused in the details. So that is the goal. That's the adjustment that city or that county staff is going to be making. And you will be informed the whole time. I really like your approach with the multiple meetings so that people do feel heard, and we can still maintain, the legal parameters for the process.
Right.
Yeah. So, and just one last thing, the media will be picking up the day that application, and so they will be playing an important role that is one degree of separation from interfering with the county work by
I agree.
spreading that information.
No,
to everybody.
I agree. But here's what you just said that we didn't say earlier, that you have incorporated lessons from the BCTT process by having other agencies involved, right? And more detailed application process. And right. And I didn't hear that the first time that happened, right? Which is super important. And then the second point is part of the complaints about the process for BCTT is they're self-regulated. And if we're saying that they're coming and they're self-regulating their approach and we don't have a response to that, that just kind of feeds into that narrative. So I'm here to say that I'm totally comfortable ruling on the conditions and the criteria. Totally fine with that. I'm just concerned about our reputation with the community if we just say, no, we can't consider it, right? After everything we went through. And so I think in the communication, we need to say, oh yeah, we learned from last time. Here are all the things we've added to our process. I think that would be really important rather than saying we can't incorporate the report.
Yeah, no, I like, yes,
Right?
I like the nuance.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I think I'll just say this briefly I don't understand exactly the detail, but as I recall, the part of the complaint was the amount of time that the public had. For instance, they got some of the residents got postcards and the mail wasn't delivered. Well, I live in a rural community and my mail is not delivered in a timely way. So issues like that left the public feeling like we didn't have time. I don't know if that can be resolved in any way, but I would like to be sensitive to those kinds of comments, not about the application per se or about the process per se, but about essentially kind of outreach issues like relying on postcards in a rural community that postcards don't get delivered. I mean, I sent out a postcard for Fireways. I never got it.
Well, trust me, on the north side of the county, I still see all the yard signs. So I think there is still at least up in the north part of the county, there's a heightened sense of awareness
I'm sure.
about the whole issue.
But that's why I think transparency is huge.
But
We should
it's
do
there.
everything we can, and the county
Sure.
should do everything they can. And I do think one of the silver linings is last time mobilized certain constituencies that are there listening, and they will assist in getting the word out. And one thing that we might consider is once the application is deemed complete and you have kind of a time certain to create the staff report, we could begin noticing the public hearings at that point.
Yeah, we should be posting a schedule at
Right.
completion.
Okay.
I don't know if that's practice of the county at this time, but that is a very good idea, is to post the schedule so that people understand that it's not ad hoc, that this.
You can't do that until it's deemed complete. because-
Right.
But once it's deemed complete and you know it, maybe then the schedule is more defined.
Yeah,
And we should
absolutely.
begin to publicize when the hearings are going to be and
Yeah.
so forth. And that would address the concern that would give at least 30 days, more likely closer to 45 days to create their.
It's a public record, as soon as it's deemed complete, so anybody can come in and ask for a copy of the application. They won't have a staff report to go with it immediately, but I mean, as the county receives information, the public is entitled to that information. We don't distribute it, but you're entitled to ask for it. Not the planning commission, please, but anyone else.
No, because that would be ex parte.
No.
Okay, so that was a good discussion, being aware of time. A couple of real quick last items. Ms. Schutz, I understand we do have a land use application on the calendar.
Yeah, replat on June 6th.
Okay, so if you could all check your calendars for June 6th, and let's make sure we have a quorum. I will not be here, so Vice Chair Hammond will be here and able to chair the meeting.
I think so, I just need to do my calendar up. So.
Technology.
That's Thursday, June 6th.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be here.
No, 6.
No, it should be a Tuesday. Should be the first
June?
Tuesday.
June 6th is a Thursday.
June 6th is a Thursday.
Fourth, I'm sorry.
Okay.
June 4th is Tuesday, and I'll be here.
I'm available.
Yeah, I
Open,
could not
yeah.
do it on the 6th, so I can do it on the 4th.
Okay, let's we sound like we have a quorum for June 4. And lastly, just open it for any discussion or updates from professional accounting staff.
Yeah, I'll just real quickly, I know we're late into the evening and I'm certain that many of you have questions over the last several weeks in terms of Mr. Nichols. And I guess, the bottom line is I can't really share anything with you at this point. I think you all can appreciate and respect that situations like this, we certainly want to be thoughtful about privacy and confidentiality. And we also want to always be conducting our due diligence in an appropriate way. So again, I know that there's lots of questions about timing, et cetera. All I want to be able to communicate to you, though, is that you still have a very committed staff here in the Community Development Department. We're all here to help support you. And regardless of, what goes forward, we're going to be here to support the entire Planning Commission. So again, I know that's not giving you maybe the specific information you'd like to have, but I hope you can respect that we're just trying to be as thoughtful as possible as we move through this.
Appreciate that. Anything else from the Planning Commission? Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you.
Wow.